welcome back to the Jurassic World Alive balancing list that I myself made. This is gonna be the part 2 of the first part that I did. The first part I think I did all of the non-hybrids and some hybrids, some super hybrids as well, from common down to epic. And now we only have legendary and apex and unique creatures to talk about. So before we get into this list, I'm gonna have to tell you guys that you kind of have to watch the first part just so you can understand better what I'm trying to do here, how I'm balancing creatures and how they change and stuff like that. If you don't want, then that's fine. Acrocantops are first legendary, got quite a big change, so health and damage especially has been lowered by a really huge amount. The speed has been buffed though, so there is something good that happened to Acrocantops. With the abilities, something that changed is I guess I kind of switched around the first impact and the revenge rampage, so now it has a revenge shattering rampage. And it no longer has a first impact, it has a wounding impact now, which is a new ability. And that's kinda it really with Acrocantops. It's a cunning fierce, so all the resistances are okay. I did add a swap prevention resistance because the one in the game didn't have one, so yeah, that's just to balance things out. Anyways, let's go to the next one, which is Ankylosaurus, another pure resilient hybrid. I'm pretty sure there are way more pure resilient hybrids than there are fierce or cunning. Ankylosaurus, nothing much really changed. HP got a little bit nerfed, damage a little bit buff. I guess the biggest win for him is that it now has some resistances, as you can see right here. With Alloraptor, it's another one of those really weird creatures. First of all, Alloraptor is one of those creatures that unbalanced no matter how you look at it, and so I had to change him so he wouldn't be too powerful. Damage is way too much for something like Alloraptor, something that's so fast should not have that much damage. That should not be a thing unless it has like only a strike or an impact, but he has like a rending takedown and also 2 rampages. However, he did get a little bit more HP back, and now it gets a defense shattering impact instead of a distracting rampage. Still keeps the rending takedown because what Alloraptor is useful just because it has that rending takedown. And when it comes to resistances, I had to remove some resistances right here. So remove the distraction resistance because it's a cunning fierce. You know, cunnings can be resistant to distraction, but fierce cannot be resistant to distraction, and when you combine those two together, this cunning fierce creature becomes weak to distraction and crit reduction. So I just had to remove that. But he did get a bleed resistance of 50%, and also like the biggest change here for Alloraptor, now he can be diesel. He only has 75% resistance against deceleration, so that means that if you fight against someone that decelerates you 50%, you're still gonna have like 110 speed, 111 speed, something like that. Obviously this matters, like if you put boost into the speed and you have like 140 speed, then your average speed is gonna be something like maybe 115 or something like that. In any case, he does become more balanced, and that's kind of like my main point here. I don't want to make every creature really overpowered. I want them to be able to be balanced. I want them to be able to be countered by stuff that they can be countered by. And also, if you're wondering why he isn't like immune to deceleration anymore, because he is a fierce cunning, you expect from a creature that has fierce DNA in him to be able to be immune to deceleration, but this is not the case with this rework, because you have to keep in mind that fierce creatures are immune to deceleration. They have to be immune to deceleration. But cunning creatures are the opposite of that. They cannot be immune to deceleration. They are weak to deceleration. And when you combine those two together, you get a resistance where it means that they can be resistant from 75%, for example, to 50% resistant to speed reduction in this case, but they can never be immune to it. So yeah, if he was a pure fierce, then he will be able to be immune to it. Or if he was a resilient fierce, then yes, he will be able to be immune to the deceleration. It might seem weird if you don't really know what I'm talking about, but if you watch the first part of this, then you will understand what I'm trying to say. So let's go to Allosinosaurus, which is a fierce resilient, and yes, it is a fierce resilient. It only says that it's a fierce in the game, but it kind of makes sense to give him a fierce resilient class, because after all he is made out of Sinoceratops, which is resilient, of course. I kinda also had to give it a decelerating strike, as you can see right here, and that's only so I can further prove that it's a fierce resilient, because if it only had instant charge, that wouldn't be enough to justify that he will be a fierce resilient. But now that he has a decelerating strike, a decelerating ability, now you can kind of see, then yeah, he is a resilient fierce. So that's what I did with Allosinosaurus. Of course, I also nerfed a little bit of its HP, his damage as well. He kind of had a little bit too much damage, especially something that can go for instant charge. That was, you know, it was way too much damage in my opinion. However, he did get a little bit of speed, and he also got a decelerating strike, so now he can decelerate creatures that he can counter. So yeah, that is a really, like, probably like the biggest change. Like, I don't think there has ever been a situation apart from Trichosaurus where there was a Tyrannosaurus kinda like hybrid where he could decelerate. I think Trichosaurus is like the only one, or was the only one before they changed him, and you can really see how that can be powerful. Anything else? Of course, he also got some resistances because he kinda lacked those. He didn't have any, so you know, why not give him speed and vulnerability immunity. And now Ankylodactylus, another really recent hybrid. So this one is weird because Ankylodactylus, it's made out of Ankylodicorus and Prendocdactylus. And Prendocdactylus, we all know that it's a cunning, and Ankylodicorus in the game right now, it's a pure resilient. So it makes sense why it's a cunning resilient. However, my version is different because you will know that Ankylodicorus it's a fierce resilient. When you add a cunning and a fierce and a resilient together, it creates a wildcard, as you can see right here. So this means that a wildcard is basically like really versatile. He can counter every class. Of course, he can't really do that because that will be too overpowered, but he can deal with all of the classes that he faces up against that exist in the game. Even though he might not kill them 100% of the time, he can still do well against those classes. So because he is a wildcard, he has the opportunity to have every one of its abilities, to have like a fierce strike, a resilient strike, and a cunning impact all in one moveset. That's why I gave it a shielded heavy strike, because a shielded heavy strike, basically what it is basically a combination of a fierce strike and a resilient strike. That's basically what this ability is. The normal version of heavy strike doesn't have a shield, but this version has a shield, which makes it more resilient than it is a fierce ability, but it's still like a mix between fierce and resilient. Obviously still has evasive cunning impact and alert superiority, which is actually a new ability. I don't think I've talked about this, or I don't think there was an ability like this in the previous part. So this alert superiority, basically what it is a normal superiority rampage, but when it gets down to 33% of its health, it transfers into a resilient strike with priority. And apart from that, I guess that's kinda it really. So distraction, because another weird thing about wildcards is that if you watched my first part, you will understand how this works. But for those of you who don't, so wildcards are made out of all the three classes, as I said many times, and that basically means that you have a cunning which can be resistant to distraction, and then you have a resilient which has to be immune or resistant to distraction, and then you have a fierce creature which is, it has to be weak to distraction, so he cannot be resistant to it. And that when you combine all of those three stuff together, you get a class that can be resistant to every effect, every debuff in the game. You have to keep in mind that having a resistance to something and being immune to something are two different things. Another pure resilient hybrid. So nothing really interesting about Ankylomoloch. Little bit of I guess I did nerf him a little bit. So he did get resistances and immunities to rate reduction, distraction, and speed reduction. I actually changed it just because again he only fierce creatures or fierce resilient creatures can have the immunity to deceleration. So yeah, that is it. Nothing that interesting. Ankylosaurus, another one of those dinosaurs. Again, nothing really interesting. Kind of the same story as you can see right here. He did get a better buff in HP and in attack as well. So yeah, I guess that's that. He's definitely a better tank. He can take more hits than other tanks now, which is good. Arctacles, a fierce resilient this time. The abilities are okay, I don't mind them because you have some fierce abilities like this one, and you have a mix of fierce and resilient abilities like this one, and you have a, I guess, mostly resilient ability like this one and this one. I guess you can count digging as a resilient ability. So yeah, I guess other things that are fierce about Arctacles, I guess the damage is a bit fierce, and the speed, it's not really a fierce. It's just I just thought of, like, I don't know, he had to be a little bit faster, just because like his speed was way too low, to be honest. And not only that, this speed 121 speed also helps him a lot with some matchups, because I did some testing with almost every creature. I don't want to say that I did with every creature in the game, but I did with most of the creatures in the game. I did a little bit of testing, and I saw what works and what doesn't, and I had to change either his speed or one of its abilities and stuff like that, and speed was one of them. So yeah, and as you can see, I did remove the rending resistance, because fierce plus resilient, you know, it's resilience are weak to rending. Also the swap prevention, again, its resilience shouldn't have something like this, and when you add another fierce into equation, you still shouldn't have something like this. With Ardontosaurus, again, nothing much. I guess he no longer has a first strike, he has a defense shattering strike. Swap prevention no longer has it because it makes no sense for, again, as I said with Arctacles. Vulnerability from 50% to 100% because fierce resilient, they have to be immune to those things, as well as speed reduction. Grade reduction, they can be resistant to it, only 75% resistant I decided to add. And apart from that, I guess also taunt, I changed it from 75% to 100%, just because like I don't understand why they have to give so many creatures a 50% or a 75% resistance in taunting when they can just give it 100% resistance in taunting, because like taunting is really useful for race, so why would you just want to add more RNG to that? It makes no sense, like it's kind of annoying. Another one of those Hadrosaurus hybrids that isn't really good. So armor 50% just to help him a little bit. He still keeps the resilient strike, he keeps diesel regeneration, which is a new ability I made. He gets a group heal because he lost the lesser group heal, and also greater emergency heal I don't think is as useful as a normal group heal, and I added this just because it's actually, in my opinion, better. I mean, it kind of depends on the situation you're in. And also added a medium resilient counter attack, so he can now do damage. He can actually do something against an opponent. And yeah, this will, I don't know if this will make him better in raids or would make him weaker in raids. I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe he will become better or maybe worse in some situations. I guess it still depends, so, you know. I mean, I guess we can just adapt and make new strategies for stuff like this, so it's not a big deal. And of course, I added a lot of resistances, as you can see. Some got removed, like the bleed resistance on a pure resilient hybrid. Makes absolutely no sense. Crit reduction, vulnerability for 25%. Because again, he is a resilient, he shouldn't be fully immune to it. Stun also to 25%. I honestly have no idea why I changed it to 25%. I I actually don't know why I changed this, so yeah, just please ignore this. It's probably my mistake. Added a distraction resistance, so I mean, it doesn't really matter with this distraction resistance because the only ability where you can attack, I mean, also this resistance is also kind of useless because he cannot decelerate opponents. So I guess, I mean, it's better, it's good to have, but I don't think it's that useful. But it doesn't really matter. It's not gonna change him. So, you know, whatever. He's still a really decent resilient. And another resilient, which is Carbotoceratops. I am honestly shocked how Carbotoceratops is considered a resilient, but yet it has a distraction on him. Like, how does that make any kind of sense? So, Carbotoceratops, Nazutoceratops got changed into a pure resilient, so that's why Carbotoceratops it's also a pure resilient. So his health was a little bit too much, especially that he has 50% armor, which is a lot. Added a superiority vulnerability because it makes sense for a resilient. Swapping Headbutt, it's the new version of Swapping Headbutt, the better version, I guess you can say. And of course, bleed resistance got removed and added those two immunities, which is nice. So, Purotaurus also got changed. Yeah, so health, he had a little bit way too less HP. Like, come on, that's a little bit too mean. That's kind of mean for Carnotaurus to have so little HP. He's kind of like a glass cannon, if you think about it, but a really bad glass cannon. So, what did I change? Added a Great Antagomizer, which is a new ability. Added a Precise Piercing Impact, which is also a new ability. And everything else, he still has a rending, a greater rending counter. So, that's kind of like, not only he has rending, he can also pierce through armor. So, now it kind of makes sense why he is a fierce resilient. And when we get down to the resistances, we get speed and vulnerability immunity and just a little bit of distraction immunity, just to, like, he can cleanse distraction, so it's not a big deal if he gets distracted. Just, you know, it's better to have some distraction resistance than nothing. So yeah, that's Carnotaurus. Colhast, okay, from a wildcard to a normal cunning, everything else is still kind of the same. I don't know why I said that the damage got changed, but it actually never changed. I don't know why I noted this, but okay. Added an evasive strike, the new version obviously. Added an impact and run, but without the precise, so he can no longer burst dodge. And added a new version of group distracting impact, which is called, instead of a restricted group distraction, it's called a group distracting impact, because that's basically what a group decelerating impact is, but with deceleration instead of distraction. So I don't really understand why they decided to go with this name, but whatever. I don't know, sometimes everything in this game makes no sense. And of course, because he is cunning, I gave it bleed immunity, which will help him a lot. Evasive impact, the new version, and the new version of evasive impact, as well as distracting impact, and some resistances that got added, the swap prevention and the bleed. And then the crit reduction and the distraction got changed to 75%. And let's move on to Darwin's Opterix. I had really big problems with Darwin's Opterix because he wasn't powerful enough to counter the stuff that he needs to counter. If you're wondering what a Fierce Resilient would counter, like Darwin's Opterix, he would counter something that's cunning and resilient. And I had to change a little bit of its stuff, and that's mostly because it was really hard to make him good, to not make him lose to some creatures, because he would lose to stuff that he would counter, and that didn't really make sense. So yeah, I had to change a lot. So I guess the best thing that I changed is that I gave it a merciless alert, something that Alberto Spinos has. I think that's how it's called, or Spinos Albertos, I don't know. So yeah, I gave it that. I also gave it a binding impact. I could have left it with the first impact, but I don't know, I wanted to try something different. Still, some resistances as always. He no longer is immune to bleed, but he does get a speed immunity, vulnerability, stunning, and damage resistance. So yeah, that's kind of that was a little bit hard to figure out, but I managed to do it anyway. So let's go to Dilophoboa, a cunning resilient, the stuff that I talked about actually. So yeah, it's a cunning resilient because Dilo it's cunning and Titano it's resilient. What I changed? I guess I did change. Now it has an alert counter distraction. It no longer has a venomous counter because it didn't really make sense to have a venomous counter, because which doesn't really make sense for a cunning or for a resilient to be able to do. And he no longer has the nullifying impact because nullifying impact together with nullifying rampage and nullifying strike are kinda tricky to deal with, because you have to keep in mind, because nullifying impact is an ability that can nullify every positive effect, which means that basically what nullifying impact is basically a combination of all the classes abilities. For example, Fierce plus Resilient plus Cunning Strike, that are all smashed into one ability where they nullify every positive effect. For example, Nullifying Impact nullifies shields, something that Fierce does. Nullifying Impact also nullifies dodge, something that a Resilient does, and also they nullify damage increase, critical increase, obviously something that a Cunning does. So because of that logic, I kinda want to keep nullifying impact exclusive to wildcards. Only wildcards can have a nullifying ability, just because it makes more sense if you think about it, right? I mean, obviously there are more abilities that nullify, that also do the same stuff, where they nullify every positive effect, but the thing with those abilities is that they don't attack the player. They only nullify the abilities, but they don't actually attack the player. So because they don't attack the player, it's, you know, I see it as an okay ability. For example, Hop and Mock. Hop and Mock basically nullifies every effect, but it doesn't attack. It doesn't attack like nullifying impact. So because of that simple reason, I don't classify Hop and Mock and other abilities like this to be only wildcard abilities. Hopefully you understand what I was trying to say. Basically, let's just continue, and we'll talk about this when we get to some other interesting creatures that also have this thing going on, and still keeps the precise rampage and the sidestep, and yeah, that's basically everything, I guess. So his HP a little bit too much. Like I know that Dilophosaurus it's big, but it's not that big, you know. So like 4200 HP, it's a little bit too much for him. So 3660, it's like, I think it's a good amount of HP to have. Also, Diloranosaurus, it's got a big change. Yeah, I guess, if you think about it, because Diloranosaurus is basically a weaker version of the Diloracherius, but I mean, I guess that's to be expected, because one, it's a super hybrid, and this is only a hybrid. So I wanted to make him a little bit different. I didn't want him to be similar to him. And I gave it a superiority impact and a distracting impact. So now Diloranosaurus is able to cleanse, distraction, and also decelerate the opponent, which makes sense because he is a resilient cunning, so he can have those two abilities. And also I had to change the emergency heal from greater emergency heal, because if he still had the greater emergency heal, that will impose some problems against some dinosaurs, against some matchups, and yeah, he will be able to counter something that he wouldn't be able to counter. Let's go to Diplovonator, which is like a better version of Diplotator, the upgraded version of Diplotator, the pro version of Diplotator. So, where do I start? I guess the abilities. So, Definitive Strike, I mean, it does kind of make sense because Concavenator, I think Concavenator in the game is classified as a resilient fierce, so it kind of makes sense for him to have a definitive strike, but in this case, in my version, it doesn't really make sense for that, so I had to get rid of that for a normal cunning strike, as well as the precise shattering counter. I replaced it with a normal shattering counter. And also he no longer has a distracting impact, he has a defense shattering impact, so he's like 50-50 when it comes to fierce and cunning abilities. And resistances, and remove distraction immunity, because of course a cunning fierce can't really be immune to distraction. And added a speed reduction by 50%, which won't help him, but if you decide to put boosts into his speed, then that speed reduction resistance will be really useful. Also added a bleed and vulnerability, swap prevention as well, and blah 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 blah. Let's go to Dodo Savior. What do we have here? So Dodo Savior, just a pure cunning. For one, he had way too much HP and also way too much damage. Way too much damage. That it's like he technically has 2 rampages. Well, actually he has like a rampage and like a devastation almost, because the alert decoy, it's basically a 2.5 times damage ability because of the critical chance. So yeah, I just had to nullify the damage mostly because that's way too much for something like this. And yeah, also Protective Alert, it's the new version of Protective Alert, which is a more cunning ability this time. And when some resistances got changed, as you can see right here. And that's it with the Savior. Dracoceratops. So this is interesting. So from a pure fierce down to a pure resilient, which is quite interesting. So yeah, again, Dracoceratops Gen 2 got changed into a resilient. So because of that, it also made sense for Dracoceratops to be a resilient. So yeah, I just had to change this because it makes more logical sense. Of course, I know that this is a game and nothing has to be perfect, but I kinda like to have certain rules into my game, or I guess into my list or whatever. I want to follow some rules that make sense. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So yeah, what changed? And what else? Resilient Strike, Decelerating Impact, it still has a cute stun, so there's that. It gets a Rampage, it no longer has a Cleansing Impact. And it has a swap-in headbutt, so it still has a swap-in damage ability, but it's not... I don't know, I think swap-in headbutt, especially this version with 100% chance, I think this is a better version. I think this is a better ability than swap-in savagery, just because in swap-in savagery you can't burst through armor, and you also some creatures are also resistant to rending, so I think swapping headbutt is actually better in this scenario. So yeah, I guess there's that. Also, I noticed that the armor, it says that it changed to a 15%, but it actually got changed to a 10%, so that's just a mistake that I made, like many others in my life, so just ignore that, please. Duzungaya, it's another one of those weird dinosaurs that I had to change a lot to Duzungaya because he was a little bit too powerful. So yeah, obviously from a resilient got changed to a fierce resilient because Tuzungaripus it's a fierce and Mirogaya it's a resilient. I know, really big shock. And yeah, that's basically what I did. Nothing that interesting. I guess now it has an armor piercing counter, so now you can understand better why he is part fierce and part resilient. He might not have any shattering abilities or bleeding, but he does have a group ferocity, which is a fierce ability if you think about it. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's Dozungaya. So yeah, some changes had to be made. For one, precise rampage doesn't really make sense why he would have precise rampage, because there's no there is no resilient anywhere in his components, so that just makes no sense. So had to change that for a normal revenge impact, which, you know, it's not as good, but I mean, it's still okay, I guess. He still has defense shattering, rampage, and a distracting revenge, impact, rampage, whatever, and blah 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 blah. I guess, yeah, removed those two things because it makes no sense for him to have them, and also changed some of those things to make him just, you know, just a little bit better. Maybe apart from this one, maybe this one made him a little bit weaker, but let's go to Ankylosaurus. So Ankylosaurus, what can I say? I mean, I guess he is more because Ankylochops and what? Ankylochops is made out of what? A fierce and a resilient. And then it gets hybridized into Ankylosaurus, which you hybridize it with Megalosaurus, which is another resilient, which basically means that Ankylosaurus it's more resilient than it is fierce. For those of you people that might remember Ankylodicurus, which is like in the same situation. He keeps some fierce abilities as always, because if you can hybridize the creature with however many resilience you want, but as long as he has only one fierce component in him, that means that he still is technically a fierce resilient. So yeah, nothing much changed with the moveset. I guess he has a heavy strike now, which is as I said, like a combination between a fierce and a resilient strike. So that's basically kind of what it is, as you can see. So yeah, again, nothing much changed. I guess some minor changes here, and yeah, I guess that is it for him and Telomot this time. But I guess the biggest problem that Entelomorph has is that it doesn't really have a lot of damage output. He has really little damage, and he can't really do anything, honestly. He might be he probably is like one of the worst legendaries in the game. I mean, he can be useful in raids, but Keratoporcus it's also an option, which it's way better, honestly. So yes, he did get a little bit less HP, but he got a little bit more damage, and also its speed it's also a little bit decreased. But I've talked about this in the first part why I did this, so you can understand why. Critical a little bit increased in critical, not a big thing. Long defensive strikes. So this is basically like the biggest change. However, with long defensive strike, he can now defend itself better against attackers. And also it gets a group shattering rampage, which it's kind of like a new ability. This ability used to be introduced with Thor in the new update, but it got changed to a group shattering impact. So yeah, I basically just revived that ability with Entelomorph. So yeah, Entelomorph will definitely be a much better raid creature. He will be way more useful this time, especially with a group shattering rampage. So yeah, that is Entelomorph. I'm pretty happy about this change. So yeah, removed some, and of course did change a little bit of the resistances, as you can see right here. So what is the next one? Eremoceros. Nothing much changes. I guess he now has a cunning or a medium counter. So first of all, he was way too fast. So yeah, I just had to nerf that speed because it made no sense. Kind of like Antelope Chops, kind of like him. So yeah, damage also got nerfed. However, he did get a medium cunning, a medium counter attack, which will, help him with damage. And as well as some resistances obviously got changed. And yeah, that is a Remoceros, I guess. Nothing that interesting really. Fukui Mimos. Okay, this is a little bit more interesting. So what changed with Fukui Mimos? So Fukui Mimos, Fukuisaurus actually got changed. So I nerfed the HP of Fukui Mimos because I also nerfed the HP of Fukuisaurus. However, I did give it a small shielding counter, as you can see right here, which will definitely help him defend itself because he doesn't have that much HP. He has a really small amount of HP compared to other creatures, and yeah, I kinda had to give it a small shielding counter in order to counter that small HP. So yeah, every time when he gets attacked, he gets a 50% shield for one attack, one turn. And also, I guess another thing is the group cunning rampage got changed, but the only thing that's changed right here is that it no longer has two delays. It only has one delay this time, and also it only has one, and also it has now two cooldowns. So basically I swapped the delay amount with the cooldown amount. That's basically all that I did. And yeah, that's basically Fukui Mimos. I guess the speed a little bit too slow, but I mean he does have like shelter, which will boost his speed by a lot, and also he will get healed, so whatever, it's not a big deal. He can still counter what he needs to counter, so he is fine. He's not bad. You might think, looking at this, that he is actually really bad, but no, he is not. He is actually in some situations better than the actual version of Fukui Mimos. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that change. What is the next one? Giga Spikeasaurus. A really interesting dinosaur. So I really wanted to put Giga Spikeasaurus on my team a long time ago, but then I realized that yeah, he is kind of garbage, so I don't think I want to put him into my team. However, this is gonna change. Today this is gonna change because Giga Spikeasaurus, as you can see, got a pretty significant buff. I think like Giga Spikeasaurus, it's the one of the few creatures that got a consistent buff where every one of its abilities or its stats or his resistances got changed for the better instead of nullifying one resistance and buffing another one up. So yeah, health is definitely like the biggest problem with Giga Spikeasaura because he doesn't have enough. He needs a little bit more health. He does have 40% armor, which helps him a little bit, but you know, it's having more health also helps, and the speed is also a little bit decreased, but not by a huge amount. It doesn't, it's not really a difference, to be honest. It's not a big change. Critical, he has more critical chance, so he can get more criticals this time. And also added a total slowing impact, which slows down the opponent for 3 turns 100%, which basically means that if you use Giga Spikosaurus, you're most likely gonna be faster unless they're immune to speed. You're gonna be faster than almost any other creature in the game, so almost than any creature in the game, which is really good. And of course the resistances. So distraction resistance, it's something that he definitely needs, especially nowadays with all the dinosaurs that can distract you. So yeah, this resistance is really powerful for Gigaspicosaurus, and also added 2 other resistances just to help him a little bit. So what do we go here? Okay, Cryptoceras, it's the next one. And if you know from the first part, you will know that Stegoceras has a flock of 2. And because he has a flock of 2, it only made sense that also Cryptoceras also has a flock of 2. So, from a cunning resilient to a pure resilient, because I also changed Stegoceras to be a pure resilient. And yeah, basically just a pure resilient. What is something that changed? I guess I can talk about the alert invisibility, which is something new that I added. So, alert invisibility, it's kind of like long invisibility, but when it gets down to 50%, you get a priority, and you also get a shield for 50% for 3 turns for attacks. So, you know, I guess, I don't know, it becomes a weaker version, I guess, because you lose one of your dinosaurs, so it makes sense for you to have a weaker ability if that happens. So that's basically what this ability is. Anything else? I guess he no longer has a critical rampage, which yeah, I guess it's a bit sad, but yeah, you know, it's for the sake of making this game balanced, so I don't really care. And yeah, that's basically it. Grilliancan, from a cunning to a cunning fierce. Well, Grilliancan, I guess Grilliancan, it's weird because I often compare Grillican to Photozaura, which I guess it makes sense, but spoilers alert, Photozaura, it's made out of a cunning and resilient, while Grilliancan is made out of a cunning fierce creature. So if you think about it, Photozaura, it's actually a counter to Grilliancan, because cunning can nullify the fierce, resilient can nullify the cunning, and so on. So yeah, but that doesn't stop him from becoming a good creature. So yeah, health and damage got nerfed. However, he did get an evasive strike, which is the new version of evasive strike, as you can see right here. Persistent ferocious strike, which will help him with a lot. He will be able to do so much damage now. And also he has a defense shattering impact, so he can also pierce through armor and shield as well. A long dodge, which is also a new ability. And when it comes to resistances, he no longer has a resistance to distraction, but he does get better resistance to swap prevention and damage, or sorry, speed reduction. So there's that. With the 129 speed, I'm pretty sure if you decelerate him with 50%, I think he's gonna still be like decently fast. He's still gonna outspeed some creatures. I'm actually curious how much speed will he have. So you divide that by 2, you divide it by 2, you divide it by 2 again, and you get yeah, 113 speed basically. So yeah, he will still be really fast. He will still have enough speed to counter some slower dinosaurs. So that's good, I guess. Obviously, you can also boost its speed by a huge amount, and but that's a different thing. We get now to Indominus Rex. So if you saw the first part, you will know what I did with the cloak and with the other Indominus, with Indominus Rex Gen 2. So I'm not really gonna talk about that because I don't want to make this video longer, so I'm just gonna skip off some stuff. But just so you know, I completely changed the way cloak works. So yeah, maybe pause the video and read on this stuff to see what I changed with the cloak. And yeah, the other moveset, the other abilities, it gets now a cunning impact, because after all, he is a cunning fierce. He is no longer a pure fierce, because Velociraptor it's a cunning, so it just makes sense to make him 50-50. And yeah, the speed also got changed to a little bit. He's a little bit more fast now. And apart from that, I guess that's the biggest change that he got. So yeah, okay, let's go to the next one, which is Indoraptor Gen 2, which is a hybrid of Indominus Rex Gen 2. So with Indoraptor Gen 2, Indominus Rex, it's a cunning fierce, and then it gets hybridized with blue, which still makes him a cunning fierce, but this time he is more cunning than he is a fierce, because blue, it's a second cunning that gets hybridized with Indominus Rex Gen 2, and that he becomes more cunning, but he can still do some fierce things, for example, armor piercing rampage or mutual fury. Those are the two things that are more focused towards fierce creatures. And yeah, the Indoraptor Gen 2, I mean, I guess it's just a weaker version of the normal Indoraptor. Something that Indoraptor Gen 2 lacked was damage output. He didn't really have that. I mean, he does have Mutual Fury, but it's kind of risky to use Mutual Fury. You have to be in a really specific situation in order to make Mutual Fury useful. So yeah, he gets an armor piercing rampage, which it's not a big change, because most of, like, let's be honest, most of the people who use Indoraptor Gen 2 are always gonna go for a cautious rampage no matter what, just because cautious rampage is such a good ability for cunnings to counter fierce creatures. So yeah, I mean, he can like still somewhat counter some resilience. So rending, swap prevention, bleed, and what else is there? I guess that's it really. Let's go to the next one, which is Keratoporcus, which is like a more defensive. Well, I don't know if I should call it defensive. I guess it is a more defensive version of Entelomorph. So as you can see, a lot have changed. A lot has changed with Keratoporcus. So where do I start with this one? So basically everything here got changed, even the class. The abilities except for Mutual Fury and Group Shattering Impact got changed. And also it has a persistent counter, which should help him against some, It also gets a persistent counter, something that I think Archaeotherium has, if I remember correctly. And resistances, all of those changes right here. And the reason why I changed so much is basically because of this big change. So, from first to a first resilient. Yeah, because of this change alone, I had to change a lot of those stuff right here. So yeah, I guess you can see why there's so much stuff that I changed with Keratoporcus. So yeah, there's that. Keratoporcus is definitely gonna be useful in raids more because he now has a group decelerating impact. Kulaburjania is next, and yeah, I guess also, I mean, they don't really change much, so obviously those had to be changed to suit to be better suited towards a cunning resilient, and of course the new group distracting impact. And that's it. Now to Mammotherium. So Mammotherium, it's a weird one because he is really powerful, but he's also really weak. So because like Woolly Mammoth no longer has the persistent ferocious strike, because well, I mean, for one, Woolly Mammoth is a resilient, so obviously it shouldn't have anything close to these abilities. And also Mammotherium, it's made out of two resilience, so you know it's really just a pure resilient at this point. So it gets a long defensive strike, a taunting rampage instead of a digging taunt, because it doesn't really make sense where digging taunt came from. It makes sense for Memolania where this ability came from, but not for this guy. It makes no sense for Mammotherium, so I replaced it with a taunting rampage just to have a little bit more damage output, because now he no longer has the persistent ferocious strike, as well as those resistances right here. And Megalosuchus. Okay, Megalosuchus is a really interesting one because Megalosuchus, it's like the worst ever super hybrid in the game, because he is just so weak. He has so little HP compared to Gorgosuchus, which has way more HP than this. And he's really slow, which I guess you can kind of argue that it makes sense because Megalosaurus it's also really slow, but like still, it's a little bit too much. And he just doesn't have any really good abilities. He's just, yeah, I don't know. He's really weak. Like Gorgosuchus is way better than Megalosuchus, way better. However, that changes today because, as you can see, you know, Megalosuchus is one of my favorite creatures. Unfortunately, you know, I can't really use him in the game because he's just garbage. So I really wanted him to be good, which I think it's a little bit faster than Gorgosuchus' speed. Critical chance to 20%, and the class change from resilient to fierce, from resilient fierce to fierce. And also added the new version of First Strike, which increases the damage by a little bit, and also the new and improved version of Ferocity Strike, and what else? Emergency Heal and Armor Piercing Counter, and that's basically it really. So now Gorgosuchus, so now Megalosuchus is definitely gonna be a much better fierce resilient busting dinosaur, or whatever you wanna call him. Megalosuchus is gonna be able to counter almost any resilient out there as long as he's not like a resilient cunning. So yeah, he's basically like one of the best resilient dinosaur busting creatures. Now let's go to Megistocorus, which he gets a defense shattering wound and also the Sopping Savagery. And yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, apart from Sopping Savagery, there's nothing really that interesting about Megistocorus. Megistocorus, I guess it's a little bit better now. Monolemetrodon. So, Monolemetrodon, what can I say about him? Well, for a start, I took out the Nullifying Strike and replaced it with a Cunning Strike, which I'm pretty sure you probably know why I did this by now. Removed the distraction resistance. He only had like 25%, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And bleed to 50%, rending to 50%, which is still decent, which is still good. And yeah, swap prevention. He now can be immune to swap prevention. And yeah, I guess Monolemetrodon is probably one of the few dinosaurs that actually got nerfed. But he's still good enough to counter what he needs to counter, so I don't really see why I would change him anymore. Yeah, I guess Monomimus, I kind of like, I don't know, Monomimus and Proceratomimus are really similar dinosaurs, but Monomimus is the better one. And even then, I still wanted to make Monomimus a little bit more different than Proceratomimus, because the move set of those two creatures is basically the same. However, this time Monomimus has an impact and run, and also an evasive strike instead of a cunning strike. And yeah, I guess that's basically the biggest change. So now you can do a lot of damage and then swap out with Monomimus, because Gallimimus also has impact and run, so it makes sense why he would have impact and run as well. And that's basically it. Monostegatops, another one interesting dinosaur. Monostegatops used to be also one of my favorite dinosaurs, but with every other dinosaur, he got changed and he wasn't good anymore, and yeah. So yeah, Monostegatops with gets. I don't really understand why he's classified as a wild card, but okay. So from wild card to a resilient cunning, he has way more health now and a little bit more damage, and now he finally has some resistances, something that many old dinosaurs lack actually. Some resistances. So yeah, resistance to crit reduction and resistance to reduction in damage. So he can no longer be affected by those two effects, which will definitely make Monosteratops a really good legendary to have in a team. And not only that, he also gets a little bit of bleed resistance and swap prevention as well, just to make him just a little bit better, I guess. If you are in a situation where you fight against another Pata Titan with a cunning creature, then you might as well just quit the game at that point, because you will be able to not do any you won't be able to do anything against another Python Titan with a cunning creature, because he is incredibly bulky. The only way you can counter it is with a bleed or shattering abilities, basically fierce creatures. So Nodopato Titan, it's one of those dinosaurs that got forgotten. It's one of those dinosaurs that everyone forgot about and no one really pays attention to, which is kind of sad, because I really liked Nodopato Titan. I'm pretty sure Nodopato Titan was the first ever hybrid that I unlocked, and when I unlocked him and I used him in battles, he was really good. He was one of the best creatures in the game, I swear to god. But now, of course, like even an epic or a rare creature is better than him, which makes no sense. That shouldn't be the case, but whatever. So, what did I change with Nodopato Titan in order to make him better? Well, I mean, for one, I added a decelerating rampage, because he kinda lacks damage output. He doesn't really have that much damage output. And yeah, apart from that, I guess the resistances to distraction is also another crucial part to make Nodopato Titan good. So what, 75% resistance to distraction is definitely gonna help him a lot against cunning creatures. And that's basically it really with Nodopato Titan. I really wish Nodopato Titan was a better creature right now in the game, but unfortunately, I can't really do anything. So we get to Ovilopho, which I guess is just a better version of Ovilophosaurus. So Alert Tough Distracting Impact is a more logical version of the Alert Distracting Impact, because Alert Distracting Impact, like by the name alone, you will probably think of a normal distracting impact, but when it gets in the threatened state, in the threatened state, it changes to something else. Well, I mean, this is also the case with alert, tough, distracting impact, but this time, but the thing is something that doesn't get mentioned by the name is the damage, is the critical increase that it gets, as you can see right here. And I don't really understand why it doesn't get like I don't know, why not call it like alert critical distracting impact or something like that. You have to call an ability something that, you know, like what it does. You call a distracting impact distraction because you call something that distracts the opponent distracting impact or distracting strike. Like this alert distracting impact, it doesn't really make sense. So I kind of had to like change it a little bit. So now the name actually makes sense. Now it actually makes sense why it's named this way, because alert tough distracting impact, it basically, this ability basically sounds like a normal distracting impact, but it has that toughness that no that not a that a normal distracting impact doesn't have. And that's basically why I kind of had to change it a little bit, so now it makes more sense. So the only thing that I really changed about this is that the critical chance when it's in the secure state, it's only 50% for 2 turns 1 attack, and the when it gets threatened, it transforms into 100% chance, but you only attack 1 times. And however, you do reduce the damage by more than 50%, as you can see right here. So you know, you get to do more damage, but when you are threatened, you are able to defend yourself better because you distract the opponent for more. So yeah, that's basically the small story of alert tough distracting impact. So it keeps the group calling impact, which now has 2 cooldowns because this way it's more balanced. And anything else, not, I mean, that's basically it, I guess. So let's go to the next on our list. So let's get to Paramoloch this time, a pure resilient, another one of those resilient hybrids. Okay, so Paramoloch, what did I change here? So I guess Paramoloch wasn't really good at defending itself in a battle, so that's basically why I added a shielded decelerating strike. And also, I guess, a precise impact and run, because Stigimoloch also has that ability. So, you know, if you think about it, Paramoloch, when he was first introduced, he also had an impact and run as an ability. So I guess this is somewhat of a comeback of the old Paramoloch, of the OG Paramoloch, if you will. And also it gets some immunities right here, those 2 immunities that are crucial to a resilient. And nothing. And let's go to the next one, Parasaurolophus lux. Another one of those Hadrosaurus, however this time he is actually one of the better Hadrosaurus in the game. So I guess I didn't really change much. I guess something that I changed, for some reason I didn't note this, but I did change the resilient rampage into a superiority rampage. This is because with superiority rampage you can decelerate the opponent, you can become faster, but with the resilient rampage you can't really do that. So you know, this is like, in this situation it's better for Paralux to have a superiority rampage. And yeah, I guess that's basically it. So with Photosaura, I guess I don't know, it's such an annoying dinosaur. Like, it has to be one of the most annoying dinosaurs in the game. So from a cunning to a cunning resilient, because Maiasaura, it's also a resilient, so it just makes sense. Damage got nerfed by a lot. However, he did get a distraction immunity and also a crit reduction immunity, as you can see right here. However, the swap prevention got changed into a 50%, so you know you can now have greater chances of locking down Forzaura. Replaced the delayed rampage and run with a ranking clause, because so this way the reason why I didn't let him keep the rampage and run is because, again, because he will be really annoying. Like it's really annoying when you have a dinosaur that can do an instant rampage and then they can go for sidestep and keep going for sidestep until they have a rampage and run ready to go, and then they can go for that, and then you kind of get screwed. You kind of get, you can't really do anything about that. However, this time he no longer has that, so if you want to swap out with Forzaura, better use a manual swap out, because otherwise that won't work. And something else that he got, it's also an alert swapping stun, which is just a better version of swapping stun. It's just a better version, honestly, so it just makes sense to replace that. And that's really Forzaura. Pukaide, again, nothing really changed. I give it a cautious on escape, just in case. Those two immunities, and that's really it. The HP, he had way too much HP. I guess that's like the biggest change for him. But it's he can still like the thing with Pukaide is that he can distract, and he can also dodge a huge amount of damage, so him having a huge amount of HP isn't really necessary. What is Terraquetzal? It had a little bit too much HP. However, I did buff its damage by a little bit, and also replace the nullifying impact with the first impact, and also replace the superiority strike with the long decelerating strike, which it kind of depends on the situation you're in, but I think a long decelerating strike is better for Terraquetzal because it decelerates the opponent for 2 turns instead of only 1 turn. Sure, it doesn't cleanse the damage reduction, but it's, I guess it's it has some stuff that superiority strike doesn't, so I guess that's it kind of depends on the situation with a lot of those stuff. So what else? I guess the resistances, it gets some resistances, and that's it. Pirotator, really interesting raptor. So if you know from the first part, you will know that Piroraptor has a flock of 3. However, Pirotator doesn't have any flock, and that's because not every creature with a flock creature, that doesn't necessarily mean that that hybrid has to have a flock, because one of its component has. So I decided not to give Pirotator a flock, so yeah, he's just like one dinosaur army, I guess you can say. So yeah, Pirotator, the biggest problem with him is that his health was way too low. Why would you give such low HP to something like this? Like, it makes no sense. It's one of the weakest legendaries. Yeah, it's a shame because he used to be really good as a as a really as a damage dealer back in the day, but now he's just not good. Like, he's kind of terrible. So yeah, I just changed that around. He's still not like the best legendary ever, but at least this time he can actually, he can actually counter some stuff and not be completely destroyed by it. And he also gets a group ferocity, just because, I don't know, maybe he can be useful in some raids. So I don't know. I was thinking of giving it a persistent ferocity strike, but I think that's a little bit too much. I don't know. I think that will be a little bit too powerful for him. So I think a group ferocity is the best thing I can do. As well as the resistances, like every other dinosaur that doesn't have resistances, he really needs some resistances. So what? Speed reduction. The speed reduction resistance is probably the best one out of here. And yeah, just the other two resistances to make him a little bit better, and that is Perotator. So Rajakylosaurus was mostly a resilient, even though he kinda is a fierce creature, because after all, Rajasaurus it's a fierce creature, so you know. Yeah, I made him a little bit more fierce, so I added an extended critical strike, and also gave it a precise shattering counter, so now he definitely is 50% resilient and 50% fierce, because he can shatter shields now, which is something really useful. As well as those resistances right here. What do we have? Rinche Sion, I think that's how it's called, I don't know. So really weird hybrid. So yeah, I added a flock of 2, and that's only because Rinchenia also has a flock of 2. Added a cunning impact instead of a first impact, but he still keeps the instant buff, so he is still fierce cunning. And not only that, he also has collision. What else? What else? Scorpius Rex. I don't think I changed him too much. So yeah, as you can see right here, didn't really change him too much. I changed the first strike to a shattering strike just because the new version of first strike also increases the damage, and I think that's a little bit. I don't think Scorpius Rex should really have that, because I don't know. I feel like he doesn't really need that damage increase. You know what I'm saying? What is the next one? Scufiosion, which Scufiosion is kind of like the same. It's kind of like Megistocorus, but more defensive, I guess, or offensive, depending on how you look at it. So the Revenge First Impact is obviously the new version with the increased damage by 15%. Added a Paling Strike because Cleansing Strike, I don't really like Cleansing Strike on this dinosaur, and yeah, I guess that's basically it. Nothing else really changed. Sinocartaraptor. Okay, so Sinocartaraptor. What can I even say about this one? I guess I did add the alert bounce and also changed some resistances and immunities, and that's really it. So Scolosaurus, it's a really weird dinosaur because he's not really used. How do I say it? He's not really made for PvP. He's made more for raid events. But as other dinosaurs, I want him to also be good in PvP, so I added a medium cunning counter and also added a little bit more damage on him, just so he can counter better the stuff that he has to counter like every other dinosaur. And yeah, that's basically the change that Scolosaurus got, as well as some changes here. And anything else? Smilocephalus. So Spinocephalosaurus was also one of those creatures that I kind of had trouble in the simulation, so I had to nerf him more than I wanted to, and this is just so he becomes balanced. So you'll notice that he now has an impact and run, no longer a rampage and run, and that's just because, as I said, I kind of had to nerf him, just because he was a little bit too powerful for its counters, some stuff here and there, and yeah, that's basically it with Smilocephalus. Spinonyx, which is a pure first. I don't care what you say, but he is a pure first, not a cunning first. Where the hell does that even come from? Like, it makes absolutely no sense. So obviously, because he is a pure first this time, he no longer has precise rampage and definitive rampage. Now he has a fierce rampage and a wounding rampage. And also, I guess it has better, so yeah, I guess critical chance is also a good thing that he has. His speed, yeah, I think, given the fact that Spinosaurus, it's really slow, and Baryonyx Gen 2, it's fast, but not that fast, you know. That's with Spinonix. He's now a pure fierce. However, we get to Spinotassocius, which is basically the thing that I said that Spinonix it's not. So Spinotassocius gets hybridized with Spinotaraptor, which is a cunning fierce, and the Caprasuchus, which is a fierce. So Spinotassocius it's more fierce than it is cunning, but he can still do some cunning stuff. Like Daring Strike, for example, he can still distract the opponent. What else? What else? I guess the damage buff, it's definitely something that Spinotaurus just really needs. I guess now it has a first impact is instead of a minor swoop, because I think minor swoop is kind of outdated. To be honest, it's kind of outdated. He needs something better, so I just added the first impact, as well as some resistances to something that they really like. I'm honestly surprised how Spinotaurus just it's not immune to at least speed reduction. Like swap prevention, really, like how is that ever gonna change? Like I don't understand sometimes what Ludia does with those dinosaurs, but I don't know. I kind of stopped caring about it, to be honest, a long time ago. Okay, so we finally meet the legend and the only one, Stegodius. Stegodius. So basically the only thing that Stegodius lacked was resistances, and I added those resistances, and I mean he is still okay. He's still good as a tank, so you know, of course I also added the Tagomizer, something new. I know that he no longer has the ability to group decelerate flocks and to group decelerate opponents in raids, but I don't think Stegodius is even that used in raids, honestly, because he's not really. I'm pretty sure there are better alternatives to Stegodius in raid strategies, so you know it's not really a loss if you think about it. Tragodistes, another one of those really old, really ancient dinosaurs that was really good, but now it got shut down and it's really terrible. So Tragodistes, like it's basically similar to Stegodius. It's more defensive, Tragodistes, because it has long invisibility and also it has a healing ability, and I guess yeah, it's basically just another Stegodius, but yeah, it's as I said, it's basically just a more defensive Stegodius. So that's Tragodistes. Also, it has more resistances to Stegodius, as you can see right here. So yeah. Also, Tragodistes is better in raids than Stegodius, so yeah, I guess that's a way to differentiate Stegodius from Tragodistes. So Chastonix is one of those dinosaurs that I really like, but unfortunately he doesn't really stand up to the current meta that's going on. So yeah, unfortunately because of that he's not really useful as he was one time. But hopefully this change will bring him a little bit of usage more. So Tristornix health got a little bit reduced as well as the speed. However, it does get the new abilities, the new first abilities, and also it gets something new, the Adrenaline Rush, which actually this ability used to be a thing on Poster Sutures, I think, on Postimetrodon. It used to be a thing on Postimetrodon. Postimetrodon had the Adrenaline Rush. It was replaced with a heal. It heals 1.5 times and increases the speed by 10% for 3 turns and the damage by 25% for 3 turns, which it's not much, but you know it's good. It's good enough, I guess. Yeah, it got replaced with like I don't think refresh. I don't feel like honestly refresh seems like a waste of an ability. Like instead of giving something unique, you refresh is basically just a group, a lesser group heal, but without the group heal, it only heals yourself. So yeah, it's, I don't even know why it exists. So yeah, I just replaced that with something better. And something else is that I also removed the distraction resistance that he has, because again, he is a fierce, he is a pure fierce, so he can't really have that. So, Sintamov, I mean, don't really know what to say about this one. So health changed, damage changed, speed changed, and the shielded taunting strike, now it has a shielded taunting strike, and now it has an exposing counter, just so he's more resilient, I guess. And the resistances, distraction, crit reduction, stun, and a little bit of vulnerability. So yeah, this is Citamorph, just a pure resilient now. A lot of resilience, I find. Like I don't understand why there are so many resilient hybrid, but so little fierce hybrids or cunning hybrids, like pure cunning hybrids and fierce hybrids. It's really strange. Anyways, let's go to Tyrannosaurus, which I think this is like almost the last one, the last legendary, and then we will go to uniques and to apexes eventually. So Tyrannosaurus, I guess it's the cunning version of Allosaurus. So yeah, it's faster, has the same damage, the same HP, it doesn't have any armor. However, it's able to distract the opponent with distracting impact. And yeah, basically every, like, the ability stays relatively the same. And the resistances, I guess they changed, because obviously they changed. So yeah, a little bit of bleed resistance, swap prevention, vulnerability. It doesn't have any speed, or well, it doesn't have any speed or resistances and stuff like that, unlike most Tyrannosaurus. But I mean, he is hybridized with the cunning after all, so you know. And plus, what he don't wanna really help him to, he won't really benefit from a speed resistance, like, you know, only from a speed immunity, but not from a speed resistance. But he can't be immune to speed reduction because cunning, because he is a cunning first. So you know, yeah. What is this? What? How many? Oh, okay, so this is the last one. So Utasinoraptor, the last legendary of the day. Utasinoraptor used to be such a good dinosaur, but now he's kind of garbage. So Utasinoraptor, obviously a cunning resilient, because Sinoceratops plus Utahraptor. Obviously, you can guess where I'm going with this. He now has a resilient strike, so you know he can now counter some cunnings, I guess, and as well as some resistances, like every other dinosaur. Like I'm pretty sure every dinosaur should have at least 2 resistances on them, because if you don't give anyone any resistance, especially in this time, it's kind of, it makes the dinosaur look really weak. So yeah, anyways, so this is it for the legendaries. Let's finally begin with the uniques, and the first unique that I gonna have to tell you about, that I reworked, is obviously Alberto Spinos. So Alberto Spinos, what you have? It's a mega hybrid. Like now we are gonna start to see mega hybrids being a thing, and that's gonna be really interesting to see how many mega hybrids we can have in the future. But for now, let's talk about Alberto Spinos. So Alberto Spinos, I did make him a cunning first. Yes, I know. It's kind of weird, but you have to keep in mind because Spinotastuchus is also a cunning fish, as you saw, and you know, yes, he is more fierce than he is cunning, but he still has some cunning capabilities. So Daring Strike is like the only one that he can have. Daring Strike, it's like a combination between Cunning Strike and Fierce Strike, so it just makes sense. And yeah, he no longer has a defense shattering wound, but that's not really a big deal because he still has Merciless Alert, so he can still bleed. It's not a big deal. And I guess the new Killer Instinct with the rending and not the pure damage. And what else? What else? I guess that's kinda it. Of course, I removed the critical reduction immunity because it makes no sense for a Fierce, especially for a Cunning Fierce to have something like that. That doesn't really make sense. And I guess the speed, it's changed a little bit, but it's not again, it's not something drastically, you know. He's still gonna be good. So, Androtops, another interesting dinosaur. So, the problem with the Androtops is that the Androtops is honestly kinda overpowered. And I'm talking about the new version of Androtops, this version of Androtops, and that's mostly because it has a lot of damage. 100 at 1600 damage, it's so much damage. Especially you have to keep in mind that he is also immune to distraction and has a counter that also does damage and also applies vulnerability. 1600 damage, it's way too much for something that's capable to do so much damage in such a short amount of time. I don't understand why people thought that Androtops needed a buff. Like I do understand because Androtops definitely needed a buff, but he needed more HP, not more attack. He was good when he had 1000, how much, 1500 attack, and also you could have distracted him. He was fine. The one thing that he needed was HP, not damage. So yeah, I just kind of had to basically change Androtops completely when it comes to stats because it's just too overpowered. Like honestly, it has to be one of the most powerful creatures in the game. You can still counter Androtops with creatures like Earlydom or Indotaurus or stuff like that, where they have dodge. Come on, you have to agree with me because Androtops is way too powerful. Like there is no need to have such a powerful creature in the game. So you know, I had to nullify its HP by a little bit. Well, I mean, I say a little, but it's quite a huge amount. And also a damage as well. I mean, you can basically see what I did here. However, because I did nullify his HP by so much, I did decide to give it 10% more armor. So, you know, he can now absorb better damage, I guess. Also changed the critical to a 5%. I don't know, he doesn't really need a 20% critical chance. And also added an escape and removed swapping lockdown, which is absolutely useless. I don't understand why anyone would ever use this ability ever. Resistances, and basically the only resistance that made Androtops really powerful is the distraction. Like if right now if Androtops wasn't immune to distraction at all, then I wouldn't be so hesitant to change it. Then I wouldn't mind it so much. But because he is immune to distraction, especially with that much damage, like it's a little bit too much. Oh, anyway, let's just jump to another dinosaur, another more simpler dinosaur, like Antarctovenator. So Antarctovenator, another wild card. However, unlike Androtops, he was actually more easy to rework because he wasn't so broken. So yeah, what I guess he gets a distracting shield now, which is a new ability. And what else? I guess he keeps the medium nullifying counter because he is a wildcard. He can nullify every person. And I guess the resistances are the biggest change here. So he can now be a little bit distracted, a little bit swap prevented, a little bit he can get vulnerability. He can no longer get stunned, however, and also added just a small amount of bleed resistance. So we get to Ardentis Maxima, and this is probably where I'm gonna get a lot of comments about saying that I made Ardentis Maxima too OP, but it's not really OP, and I'll explain why. So if you watched the first part, you will know why I gave a group decelerating rampage 1 delay. However, because of this change that I made, it kind of made Ardentis Maxima vulnerable to a lot of creatures in the game, because Ardentis Maxima wouldn't be able to go for a group decelerating rampage and basically counter the opponents. So because of that, I created something new. I created a taunting shielded resilience strike. It's a better version of a resilience strike. That's basically what it is. This way Ardentis Maxima can actually defend itself before he can recharge and use a taunt shattering rampage or the decelerating rampage. So yeah, I know this change is a little bit weird, but you know, Ardentis Maxima, I mean, you can still counter it. It's not like it makes Ardentis Maxima powerful. You can still counter it with bleed, with high damage creatures. And also Ardentis Maxima can still counter cunning resilience or whatever. So you know, it's all balanced and nice, and also added a distraction resistance of 50%, but removed the swap prevention immunity, because again, he is mostly resilient if you think about it. So yeah, like this shouldn't be here. Okay, this shouldn't be here. So yeah, that's Ardentis Maxima. I am quite happy about this change, even though the group decelerating rampage it's a little bit, you know. But anyway, let's continue to Ardontognattus, which is another new creature, and also like we have, and it's also a wild card. So this time it actually makes sense why it's a wild card, because Ardontosaurus is a fierce resilient and Anornatus it's a cunning, so it now actually makes sense why this is a wild card in game and in the new version of mine. So with Ardognatus, I don't know, so he has definitive strike, right? Which is a fierce resilient, which is like a fierce resilient ability. He also has a decelerating sidestep, which is a cunning resilient ability, and also has the definitive alert frenzy, which is like a really weird ability, but you know, it's whatever. And it also has, so I decided to replace the defense shattering rampage with an alert group swan takedown, which is basically a group well, I mean, as the name suggests, it's a rending takedown, but when it gets threatened to 33%, it transforms into a normal 40% rending break shield bypass armor attack with no cooldown. And this also targets every opponent, so this this ability targets every opponent, which can be really useful in raids, especially with rending, because most of the bosses that you fight in this game, most of them have like 90 to maybe 85% resistance to rending, but even that small 10% of rending can still be a huge amount, because boss have like a lot of HP. They have like 100,000 HP, so the 10% of that HP, it's like 10,000 HP, which is a lot of HP. So this is gonna be a really powerful ability for raids. However, it can be sometimes a little bit too powerful because you might kill the boss too quick, and yeah, because of that it's kind of like a really risky ability when it comes to raids. So there's that, and with the resistances didn't really change much. That is Arctor Nactus, Conzocaulus, which is a cunning. Obviously, the main thing that I changed is that I removed the speed reduction immunity and replaced it with a soft prevention immunity as well as a bleed. However, he did get better abilities, and one of them is the Determined Strike. However, this is the new version of the Determined Strike, the one that I myself made, and that's because, so basically the reason it says right here, the reason why I took away so much of its effects is because I felt like it did too much when you compare it to the new version of Daring Strike and Heavy Strike. They both have only 1-3 effects, which is for the Determined Strike, it's the effect of damage reduction, of imposing vulnerability, and of course precise. Where something like a Daring Strike, it has bypassing armor, which is one effect, reduced damage by 50%, which is another one effect, and reduce critical chance by 50%, which is another effect, 3 effects in total. And that also applies to Heavy Strike, where Heavy Strike, it increases your damage, it bypasses armor, and it also, I think it nullifies dodge. If you don't know, the Determined Strike, the actual version that exists in the game, has way more effects. I think one of its main effects of Determined Strike is that it also nullifies the critical chance to 100%, and I think, and it also reduced, and it also nullified the speed increase effect. So yeah, as I said right here, it did a little bit too much, and I wanted it to be comparable to the other abilities like Heavy Strike and Daring Strike. So that's kind of why I decided to change it a little bit. But let's get to the other ability, Superiority Strike. I gave it a Superiority Strike just like the Diloranosaurus, and also gave it a Revenge Distracting Impact instead of a Revenge Cunning Impact. I think a Revenge Distracting Impact it's a bit better just because I think a Revenge Distracting Impact is better because the distraction lasts for 2 turns. Sure, you don't get the cleansing in damage over time and the critical chance reduction, but you do, like, sometimes it's better to distract the opponent for a longer period of time than only distracting it once. So, you know, it kind of depends on the situation, like many of those abilities. Whatever, yeah, I guess some resistances to make it more cunning resilient. So, ooh, Raja, okay. I like Raja, okay. So, yeah, he got changed from resilient to a first resilient. You probably saw this coming. And also gave it a first strike, so, you know, he's actually able to do something that's fierce instead of only doing cunning things. And also something that he lacked for resistances, as you can see right here. This is just so he can actually, you know, counter its opponents better. So yeah, that's always nice. Everything else, nothing really. Proceratosaurus, yeah. Proceratosaurus from cunning to cunning resilient because Dracoceratops, it's a resilient, and yeah. So Dracoceratops, what does he have? So yeah, like Dracoceratops, he no longer has swapping savagery. He has a swapping stunning strike, which I do think it's actually better than a swapping savagery, but it kind of depends on the situation. As well as the abilities, he has a minimal speed up strike, something that Proceratosaurus, if you remember, I gave Proceratosaurus a minimal speed up strike, so that's where that comes from. And Resilient Strike, Acute Stun, and a Distracting Rampage. And that's kinda it with Dracoceratosaurus. Let's go with Entellolania. What do we have with Entellolania? So Entellolania, I think I don't really know what to think of this dinosaur because I don't really use it a lot. Even in like friendly battles, I don't think I. It's such a weird dinosaur, Entellolania. So yeah, because he is made out of more fierce components than resilient. Because he is made out of more resilient components than fierce, he obviously gets the advantage that not many have to be immune to distraction and critical reduction while also being immune to speed and vulnerability, and that's only because he is made out of two resilience. If he was made out of two fierce creatures, then that wouldn't be the case. So with Entellolania, of course, he doesn't really have the persistent ferocious strike. Just I could have let him have it, but I kind of wanted to give it an intimidating impact. So you know, I wanted to give him this ability, so I just gave it a long defensive strike and a minor heal on escape as well, just in case. And yeah, that's basically Entellolania. Early Dominus. Okay, so one thing that early Dominus always lacked was the ability to go through shield. And not only shield, but also armor. And that's why I gave it a shattering speed up strike, because as you will notice, he is also a cunning fierce, and he like I can understand he is more cunning than he is fierce, but as I said many times, he still has to have some fierce aspect to him. So a shattering speed up strike, I think it's enough to justify that early Dominus it's a cunning fierce. Because in Dominus Rex it's also a cunning fierce, however it's a 50-50, but early Dominus it's like a 75% cunning and then the rest it's a fierce. So yeah, early Dominus, I guess I also gave it a revenge distracting rampage, just so he can have more options to do more damage, I guess, because like it's early Dominus. HP buff and a decent amount of damage buff, however he did get slower, which it's probably like the biggest, I don't know. I don't think it makes early Dominus weak, because he can still use shattering speed up strike to speed himself up and become fast. But yeah, seeing 129 speed changed into 124 speed for early Dominus is kinda sad. But I kinda had to do, you know, I kinda have to follow some rules like everyone else. So yeah, this is basically early Dom. Is it better than the current early Dom? I mean, maybe in some situations, maybe. But I mean, if it's on 1v1 and early Dominus, the normal early Dominus goes for a rampage and then I go for a speed up strike, then I will win. But if he goes for a minimal speed up strike, but I also go for a shattering speed up strike, then he will win, or he will at least have more chances to win. But I mean, you know, that's kind of complicated. I don't really want to get into that, so yeah. Let's go to early Cospix, which is kind of the same as early Dominus, but early Cospix it's 50-50, so it's 50 fierce and 50 cunning. Unlike early Dominus, where he is 75% cunning and only 25% fierce. So early Cospix, yeah, basically just a much more fierce version of early Dominus. So the early Cospix was a really good dinosaur when it first came out, but for some reason they decided to make early Cospix a full cunning, which kinda it kind of makes no sense why they decided to do that, because what's the point of Orlicosaurus being hybridized with Spinonics if in the end you end up creating just a creature that has no relation to one of its parents, in this case Spinonics. And this is kind of like why I wanted to include the class changes. That's why so many dinosaurs got their class changed, just so that's also why I say whenever there's like for example with Ankylodicurus, he is hybridized with two resilient creatures and only one fierce, but he still keeps some fierce aspects like the heavy strike, and there are some other examples as well, as like Orlidominus, for example. I guess it's another one. And this is what I'm talking about. Like what's the point of having Spinonics hybridized when you like I bet you that you can replace Spinonics with every other generic cunning creature and have the same result as this one, because like I don't know, it's just such a weird, it's kind of complex to think about. But just go back to Orlicospix. So the health got changed by a little bit, the damage also got changed, speed also kind of like Orlidominus. It's slower than Orlidominus, but I mean Orlidominus should theoretically counter Orlicospix, because Orlidominus it's more cunning, so it makes sense. And yeah, this basically it's the old moveset that he had when he was first introduced, minus the piercing revenge. This is something new that he didn't have back then. So yeah, this is just a way to make Orlicospix more fierce. So yeah, I also removed those two because it makes no sense on a cunning fierce. Added these abilities, these resistances, and that is Orlicospix. Gemini Titan. So with Gemini Titan, I mean 6000 HP, I think Gemini Titan kinda deserves to have 6000 HP. Fun fact, Gemini Titan actually used to have way more HP than this. He used to have 6360 HP, but then they later nerfed that HP. I'm not sure why they decided to do that, but okay. So I just gave it a 6000 HP, just because why not? After all, he is a big sauropod, so it kind of makes sense for him. And unlike Ardentis Maxima, he doesn't really have armor, because Ardentis Maxima has like 10% armor. So so yeah, from a resilient to a cunning resilient. So this is probably gonna be a little bit controversial, kind of like Ardentis Maxima. First of all, yes, he no longer has a group decelerating rampage, but instead he has a group crippling impact, and that's why Gemini Titan it's a cunning resilient, because a group crippling impact not only reduces the speed, but it will also reduce the damage by 75% for 2 turns, and it also removes this increased speed effect that some dinosaurs have. So yeah, despite it not having a group decelerating rampage, I think this is kind of like a better option, because not only you can slow down the opponent, but you can also distract the opponent, which will definitely help, especially in raids, to have a better, and a much more fluent strategy. So yeah, this is Gemini Titan. Of course, he also gets a Determined Strike, which is a combination between Cunning and Resilient Strike. And apart from that, everything else is still pretty much the same. So yeah, this is Gemini Titan. Definitely a much better Titan than he used to be. So we get to Crippled. Ooh, I kinda like Crippled. He is a fierce resilient, But that's because of the ferocious defense. However, I did, because every one of its components is a fierce, so it just made sense for Gripoli to also be a pure fierce, which unfortunately means that he will no longer have the ferocious defense, which is quite sad because I kind of like this ability on Gripolit, but unfortunately I have to follow some rules. However, instead of the ferocious defense, he gets a ferocious impact, which is a really good ability, a really powerful ability. So yeah, Gripolit is definitely gonna be a really powerful pure fierce creature. It's probably gonna be like the third or maybe the fourth most powerful fierce creature in the game. The one above all is probably Mortem Rex, but you know. So yeah, this is Gripolit, pretty happy about that change. And we get to Indoraptor, which is another mostly cunning but also fierce creatures. Kinda like Early Dome. However, like Indoraptor, it's I don't know, it's Indoraptor, it's a unique case because unlike unlike every other creature in this game, Indoraptor it's technically made out of only two creatures, even though it's a super hybrid because it's made out of Tyrannosaurus Rex and Velociraptor, and that hybrid also hybridized with the Velociraptor, which I mean, like you don't really get another dinosaur like that. Like Indoraptor is literally the only one that has this thing, and it's really strange why they decided to do this. I'm pretty sure in the movie Indoraptor it's hybridized. Well, it should be technically hybridized with blue, but for some reason that's not the case here, which is really strange. So yeah, because I mean Indoraptor is kind of like an iconic a dinosaur. He kind of deserves to get all the good stuff. And as you can see by the changes that I made, yes, the Indoraptor is definitely now a much stronger Indoraptor. He's basically much more powerful than he used to be back in the day. First of all, its moveset got completely changed. Indoraptor can finally pierce through armor and through shield at the same time. So that means that Indoraptor, no matter what you do, Indoraptor is gonna do a lot of damage to you. Also, it has a cleansing shattering strike, which is a shattering strike, but also cleanses every ability in the game. Which I know this might seem like I'm giving Indoraptor too much, but like you kind of have to be honest with me because you do kind of want Indoraptor to be one of the best dinosaurs in the game. Obviously, this change won't make Indoraptor super powerful. He will still die to early dome. He will still die to like other creatures. So he's definitely a really good creature, but not powerful. So yeah, this is Indoraptor, as you can see right here. You can admire all of those new things that I gave him. And yeah, I'm pretty happy about this change. Maybe I went a little bit too far, but I don't know. I let you decide if I went too far or not. So let's go to Indotaurus, which is like the opposite version of Indoraptor kinda. Because Indoraptor it's more cunning, but Indotaurus it's more fierce. So yeah, that's basically Indotaurus. Cunning fierce. So yeah, I kind of had to change him a little bit, as you can see by this. So I don't know. Indotaurus, it's like a really weird dinosaur. So first of all, I had to get rid of intimidating impact because it didn't really make sense. Uh, Only resilience should be able to make you vulnerable. So cunning strike because he is a cunning fierce, and also he keeps the cleansing rampage. He keeps the revenge taunting cloak. However, obviously with the new changes to the cloak mechanic. And also the rending counter, it transformed from 33% to 25%, which it's like the reason why I did that, it's mostly because it was a little bit too powerful, and Indotaurus will be able to kill dinosaurs then he shouldn't otherwise be able to kill. So that's kind of why I decided to go with 25%. This Indotaurus, as well as those, I did change some resistances here and there, but that's kind of it with Indotaurus. Let's go to Magna Pyrrhetator. Okay, so Magna Pyrrhetator, obviously it gets buffed and nerfed at the same time, indirectly or directly from its moveset or from other creatures. So Magna Pyrrhetator, obviously cunning first, so it gets a daring strike, a fierce impact, and a fierce rampage. So now a fierce rampage is actually useful for Magna Pyrrhetator because he's actually able to use that increased damage to something, unlike first rampage where he can't really use that. I mean, you know, you can kind of see why he can't really use that. But anyway, so yeah, this is Magna Pyrrhetator. I guess the biggest nerf that he got, that Magna got, is that he can now be fully distracted. He no longer has distraction resistance and critical reduction resistance. But I mean, that's mostly because he is mostly a fierce dinosaur than a cunning, so that's kind of why. And yeah, Memolania, a pure resilient. So Memolania, what else can I say about Memolania? Just a pure resilient. Because he lost the persistent ferocious strike, I decided to give it a little bit more damage. Added a long defensive strike and a group resilient rampage, which targets every opponent. Monolo Rhino, Monolo Ryan. That changed for better or for worse. I guess you can decide. So, something that changed is the definitive strike. The new version only has 2 cooldowns and doesn't have a delay and 1 cooldown, so it no longer has a delay. It gets a nullifying strike, which he can use a nullifying strike because he is a wildcard, so he can use that ability. And a distracting impact, and it gets a swapping resilience strike. Yes, I know, it's kind of sad to see Monolo Orion no longer have swapping stunning strike, but you know, it kind of becomes annoying how many creatures have that ability, but I kind of don't really feel that bad about it. So you know, a swapping resilience strike is still decent, maybe not as good as a swapping stunning strike, but you know, it's still a swapping strike nonetheless. So the next one, Parasaurolops, another interesting one. So what, health, a little bit too much health, decided to nerf it a little bit, the damage as well. Speed, he deserves a little bit more speed, let's be honest. Added the new version of Tough Group Cunning Strike, which as you may remember from the Alert Tough Distracting Impact, the Tough Group Cunning Strike also increases the critical chance by 25% for 2 turns, 2 attacks, and that's the only change. What else? Swapping First Strike. So Swapping First Strike is the new version of Swapping First Strike, which also applies the increased damage by 15%, but it's only after it gets after you swap into it. So that's it. For resistances, nothing really changes, I guess. Some 2 new resistances, and that's it. Force Rex. Okay, so from Cunning Fierce to Cunning Resilient. Force Rex definitely got a really big change. So damage changed, health changed, speed a little bit changed, as well as critical chance. And now he has a determined strike because it's a resilient cunning, so it makes sense. Instant cunning rampage now has a delay and two cooldowns, and it's also named an instant cunning rampage, not a cautious cunning rampage, which makes no sense. So it's a more balanced version of a cautious cunning rampage. That's basically what it is. And also it no longer has little rampage and run because he has no fierce capabilities, so it gets a decelerating rampage and run. And what else? I guess alert swap instant. He now has alert swap instant. When it comes to resistances, get some new resistances. Now it can be swap prevented because of this, and yeah, that's really it. So his health was changed to a little bit, just a little bit, you know. Added the new distracting impact with only one cooldown, removed distracting resistance, added bleed, added swap prevention, and that's basically it. Nothing much changed with him. Oh boy, we get to Pterovexius now. Okay, so Pterovexius, if you know that if you watch the first part, you will know that Darwinopteryx has a flock of 3, and that is the reason why Pterovexius also a flock of 3. So yeah, this makes Pterovexius quite powerful actually. So I had to change everything about Pterovexius because of this. So his health it's lowered, damage lowered, speed also lowered a little bit. Class change from wildcard to a cunning fierce. Added a cunning strike, added a little quill shot. He still keeps the minor swoop and also has an alert cunning rampage, which if you watch the first part you will know what I'm talking about. And when it comes to resistances, removed 2 resistances right here. And what else? I guess I changed some of those resistances quite a lot. And yeah, that's basically Pterovexus. It might be, I don't think it's powerful, you know, like I don't think he's OP. He's definitely gonna be a really annoying creature to deal with because it has a flock and also the venomous counter and also the little quill shot. But all in all, it's, you know, you can still counter it. It's fine. It's not OP. So let's go to Quetzerion, from resilient to cunning to a wild card. So with Quetzerion, I guess he got nerfed to by HP and damage, and also by the resistances. So yeah, I guess Quetzerion, it's like the one creature that got nerfed to. I mean, you have to keep in mind, as I said many times, that many of those creatures also got indirectly buffed because of the changes of other creatures. So you know, you kind of have to keep that in mind. Quetzalcoatl didn't really get nerfed if you think about it. He can still counter just fine whatever he can counter. So yeah, what else do we have? Scorpius X Gen 3, okay. So, yeah, nothing much changed, I guess. So, removed the distraction resistance, added bleed, added taunt, and all of those, and that's basically it. Let's go. Let's skip to Scunosaurus. Scunosaurus, definitely one of the most powerful creatures in the game. So I had to nerf him, definitely, just because I couldn't leave him like this. So yeah, it no longer has an instant invincibility taunt, it has a distracting shield. It now has a group distracting impact, and now it has a medium cunning counter. It no longer has a full decelerating counter. What else? I guess the HP got a really big change. Speed, I guess, it's also a little bit. I mean, it doesn't really matter for a tank to be that slow. The armor also a little bit nerfed. What else? I guess those immunities also got nerfed, so he can now be stunned And also he can no longer swap because he gets swap prevented. And that's that, I guess. Let's go to Smilonemes. Smilonemes is one of those creatures that I wish I would have it on my team, but because of this one small change, I can't put it on my team. But that's besides the point. So with Smilonemes, I guess speed a little bit decreased, HP a little bit decreased, but it gets a better rampage and run without a second delay as this one right here. So, and also it gets a swap in headbutt as well. Also it gets some changes to some resistances, and that is it. Spino Constrictor, another wild card. Nothing much really changed, I guess. Yeah, it didn't really change much. I guess the speed is the biggest thing that changed, and that's really it. Sticky actually got a lot changed. Oh wow. Okay, so Sticky what? Resilient fierce. So it gets more HP, it gets more attack. The speed gets a little bit nerfed, but it's still around the same. It's not a big deal. And it gets something new, a ferocious bite, which is something that Megistotherium has, I think. It's just a defense shattering impact, but with bleed. That's basically what it is. And it also gets the little rampage and run. So looks like the little rampage and run ability found a new home when it was, you know, thrown out of the Forus Rex kit. What else? What else? I guess the resistances. He don't really have that many resistances. So you'll notice that he no longer has own escape, which, you know, it doesn't really change the way he plays, the way you play with him. So however, on the plus side, he gets all of those resistances, and I mean, to be fair, he removes those two resistances, the bleed and the swap prevention, which you might not like it, but you know, because Stigidarix, if you think about it, Stigidarix, it's more resilient, and a resilient, it's weak against those two things right here. So yeah, Tenantorex. Okay, Tenantorex, another one of those creatures that I really want to put it on my team, but it's kind of getting too old, so he's not that good anymore. Tenantorex, yeah, the damage got definitely hugely nerfed. However, he did get a little bit more speed, so that's that. Added superiority strike, so now it can decelerate, and it also gets a precise distracting impact, which is a distracting impact but with precision, which is really interesting. So that is Tenantorex. Testacornibius gets a decelerating impact instead of a cleansing decelerating impact, and what, I guess those changed a little bit, and that's kind of it, really nothing too interesting. Torodalosaurus. Okay, this is a little bit more interesting because Torodalosaurus, it's a fierce resilient, as you can see right here. But how is it a fierce resilient, you might ask? Well, because of precise piercing strike, which, you know, precision, it's a resilient. So, and also if you remember, Allosaurus, it's also a fierce resilient. So yeah, he is more fierce than it is resilient, but you know, I still have to give it a resilient aspect. And that is basically Toradalosaurus. Obviously it gets the speed immunity, vulnerability immunity, what else? I guess the speed, he also gets way more speed now, and also he gets 10% armor, which is really nice. I don't think Torodalosaurus used to ever have armor, which is weird. The only really big change with Trudaboa is the group culling rampage, which has a delay and to cooldown. And some resistances also got changed, as you can see, but that's kinda it. Nothing interesting. Trichosaurus. Okay, Trichosaurus, it's interesting because... Okay, Trichosaurus, the OG, the king of Jurassic World Alive. So... Yeah, I didn't really know what to change with Trichosaurus. He was already good enough. Like, I didn't really need to change anything about him. I guess I added the, vulnerability, speed reduction, immunity, and some taunt immunity, because why not? And that's kinda it already. Nothing that interesting with Trichosaurus. So yeah. What else? Turamoloch. Okay, so Turamoloch, it's one of those dinosaurs where he's incredibly good in raids, but when he gets down to PvP battles, he's kinda garbage. So I changed that today, because now, of course, I added a medium resilient counter. So now he can, do more damage to certain creatures in PvP, so he can, survive. And yeah, also added 20% armor, which will definitely help him absorb more damage, because Tujangosaurus also has like 10% armor, so I just gave it that. Damage, a little bit nerfed, but it's not a huge amount. The speed, it's a huge amount. He did get nerfed into speed, but he still keeps the group acceleration, so he can still technically be faster even with this speed. So, it's not a really big loss. It's not a really big loss. Yeah, so what else do we have? Utarenix. I think this might be like the last unique. Utarenix. I really like Utarenix. I wish I could put it on my team, but he's not really good enough, which is unfortunate. So with Utarenix, he transforms into a cunning resilient. He's definitely more resilient than it is cunning. And it has a determined strike now, and a distracting impact with the new version of distracting impact, of course. And it also gets on escape headbutt. The one problem that I always have with Utarenix is that Utarenix, it's always, whenever he gets attacked, he I don't know, his HP, it's too weak. Like, always when Utarenix gets attacked and he gets really low HP, he always, like, especially in my case, I always find just people swapping out to something with the swapping stun or the swapping attack, something that does damage on a swapping. However, this is meant to prevent that. The on escape headbutt is meant to somewhat prevent some of that happening. So yeah, and of course, got some changes to some resistances, and I guess that's kinda it when it comes to uniques. So now let's go to Apex creatures. So here we are, finally Apex creatures, and the final straw of this video. So let's start with Ankylos Lux. Of course, we're gonna have to start with Ankylos Lux, a mega hybrid. So Ankylos Lux, I'm gonna have to be honest, I didn't really know what to change with Ankylos Lux. Yes, I know I did give it a classification of being a fierce resilient, because the Raja, it's also a fierce resilient, and it's like he still has to have, as I said many times. So yeah, I did give it a shielded heavy strike, which is, it's a little bit fierce, but it's mostly a resilient ability. And he still has raking counterattack that can pierce through armor, so I guess that's also classified as a fierce ability. And what else? I guess the only change. I mean, of course, some resistances changed. As you can see right now, he's no longer swap prevented resistant. He's no longer resistant to swap prevention, and also he gets 100% immunity to speed reduction, and yeah, all of those stuff. Yeah, again, Ankylos looks, yeah, so I guess, I don't know, I guess he is a little bit better. I did buff him a little bit, but it's not like it made Ankylos looks way stronger, because Ankylos looks, it's already really strong, but you can counter it. You can definitely counter it. I think Mortem is probably gonna be the best option to counter Ankylos looks, so yeah, there's that. What else do we have? Acto Vasilis. Okay. Some from a wild card to why is it a wild card makes no sense to a fierce resilient, which makes sense. Again, nothing much changed. The damage and the health did change, but apart from that, I guess some resistances also got changed. But when it comes to abilities, nothing really changed. Still the same. So let's go to Serra Magnus. It's someone feeling a little bit suspicious. So yeah, again, nothing. I didn't really change Serra Magnus. I think most of Apexes I didn't really change, apart from like Gorgotrebax, I think, or Referendum. So yeah, this is Serra Magnus. Nothing really interesting. Let's move on to Gorgotrebax. So Gorgotrebax, I did replace the Revenge Nullifying Rampage with the Revenge Cunning Rampage, and that's because Nullifying Rampage, it's a wildcard only ability, only wildcards can have that ability, and you know, I could have made Gorgotrebax a wildcard, but we already have Referendum, which is more of a wildcard than Gorgotrebax is, so you know, I just decided to make Gorgotrebax a pure cunning, so you know. And yeah, I guess the one thing that really bothers me with Gorgotrebax is how slow he is. Like, I don't understand why he is so slow, because it makes no sense. It makes literally no sense. So yeah, I just had to change this to 128 speed, which is something more reasonable for a cunning. Hastos Maximus, which is like a cunning resilient, because it does have the Revenor's Rampage, which I guess, yeah, it removes dodge, which is something that only, you know, resilience should be able to do. And that's basically it. Also, it gets the resistances that a cunning or resilient would have, like those resistances right here. And also, I guess I should say that Revenos Rampage also got changed, so now it also distracts for a little bit. And yeah, it's basically just a better version of Revenos Rampage, so yep. And that's it, I guess. Anything else? Not really that important. Hydros looks too much damage for Hydros looks, and I guess that's the only thing that I have a problem with Hydros looks. Apart from that, I don't really have a problem with Hydros looks. So yeah, he's still almost the same. A Hydra Boa from a cunning to a wild card. And yeah, didn't really change much. I think Hydra Boa, it's honestly perfect when it comes to a wild card, so I don't really see why I should change it. Obviously, I did change a little bit of like the damage, immunity, and I guess the vulnerability. I also added a little bit of resistance to that, but apart from that, nothing else changed. Imperator Suchus, which is the most, how do I say this, the newest and somewhat controversial uh, Apex, because he's definitely really powerful, but you can still counter him with distraction, so he's not that powerful. So Imperatosuchus, like when I take a look at its move set, basically it makes it 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 just makes sense for him to be a fierce resilient, because he has a first decelerating strike, which is, you know, deceleration resilient, and also that roll, which also deceleration resilient, and vulnerability rampage, which is also you know, resilient. But apart from that, he is a combination of resilient and fierce, so don't really have anything else to say about Imperatosuchus apart from this. And also I did remove some of its you know, some of its resistances in order to make him a little bit more, you know, I don't want him to be that powerful, but you know, just to make him more bearable for other creatures that are not as well off as Imperatosuchus. And yeah, I guess that's Imperatosuchus. What is next? Oh, Mortem Rex, the first apex ever to be introduced, and also it's still a really good dinosaur. So yeah, Mortem Rex, the speed, a little bit of change in speed, not a big deal. So yeah, I added the defense shattering impact and shattering rampage instead of the first rampage, and that's because my new version of first rampage includes to increase the damage by 15%, and I don't really wanna give Mortem that much power because he already has Roar, which already increases the damage for 50%, so he doesn't really need that extra 10% that he gets, so you know, it's whatever. And what do we have? This is the last one. Okay, Referent Anthem. So Referent Anthem, a white card. And yeah, Referent Anthem has to be the most overpowered dinosaur in a long time. And yeah, so Referent Anthem, yeah, way too much HP for something that's like, you expect something that has the animation set of a Dilophosaurus to not have so much HP, but for some reason they gave it so much HP, which makes absolutely no sense. So I kinda had to nerf him a little bit, which is kinda sad, but at the same time you can understand why I decided to nerf him. So replace the Cunning Rampage and Cunning Rampage with Nullifying Strike and Impact, just because he is after all a wild card. And what else? Super Distraction is still the same. I could have probably made Super Distraction. I could have probably give Super Distraction 3 cooldowns to make it more balanced, but I don't think that's really necessary. Well, what else? So resistances, I guess. Yeah, resistances definitely got changed. As you can see right here, they almost all of them got changed. And also I removed taunt immunity. Like it doesn't really affect him by any means, so you know, it's whatever, it doesn't really matter. And that has been it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, this Jurassic World Alive video, where I reworked every single creature in the game. And yes, been some creatures that didn't balance correctly, or maybe you are mad that some creatures got, you know, for example, like Gorgochevax no longer has Nullifying Rampage, or Identix Maxima no longer has the 2 cooldown group Decelerating Rampage, and all of that stuff. If you find anything of this interesting, or you want to talk about more of what I could have changed, and or what you wanted to change to a certain dinosaur, then leave it in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.